They just dumped 256 tons of trash on us. So it pissed me off. I went to the hearing myself. I pulled a little blue card and I handed in. I get my 3 minutes of infamy. And I only used about 45 seconds. I said, Your Honor, Commissioner Clark, I use gas in my car. I don't want to stop them from getting their land use permit, but they just dumped 256 tons of toxic waste on my town. I want you to hold their permit in abeyance until they come back with a good neighbor agreement. He turns to me and says, Well, what is a good neighbor agreement? And I said, Well, there isn't any formal definition of a good neighbor agreement, but it's a common sense thing. It triggered the refinery manager somehow, and he yelled, This is crazy. So I'm telling him, I want you to switch every valve 2 inches and bigger in the refinery to a bellows valve. And he said, quite honestly, we haven't done anything wrong. And do you have any idea what it would cost? I said, yeah, about $10 million. In Vallejo, they had a plant that was going to import slag from metal production in Asia. Slag, toxic slag. When you make a metal in a refinery, the stuff at the bottom after you boil off all the good metals, the crap that's left, that's slag. And it's toxic. It's got all the heavy metal stuff that you couldn't get out as a pure metal. And they were going to bring that over to the United States by the shipload and pile it up and then grind it into cement.
This is
Grinding that, it sounds dusty. Doesn't it sound dusty to you?
Yeah.
It sounded dusty to me too. And about 1,200 feet away is a grade school. And I'm thinking, that amount of dust, there's no way that project's ever going to make it. They were turned down by the Planning Commission 6-1. The developers got to the city council. Grease works really well, not just on machines, but political machines too. So they wanted to resurrect the project. So they basically told the developer that they were going to move from the temporary decision towards a final EIR. And they ordered the staff to go towards that final EIR. I had just moved to Vallejo and I thought it was dead. And now they're having it pop up. And so I go to the next city council meeting. I came up with reasons that the plant was, all the documents weren't correct. And it had specific points like the buoyancy, and that's a technical issue. But the letters of everything that were there spelled out bullshit. So I said that they submitted this under penalty of perjury. I suggest that you actually file against them for the perjury because what they gave you was bullshit. And I went down my list of items one at a time, which spelled out bullshit. My list made it to the air district, which all the staff found hilarious, but it also made it to the Attorney General's office in California. And if I'm saying that the document in front of the city council is actually a perjured document, maybe they should look at it. The city's ready to go on this project, but maybe it should be looked at. They sent a 35-year experienced EIR specialist to look at it. They agreed it's bullshit. And they sent a letter to the city that said the document you have in front of you cannot be used as the basis of a decision. The document is fraudulent. Now, they didn't call it fraudulent because that begs litigation, but they basically said you can't use the document for a decision. And so the same trickery of floating things and other things too. Yeah, they had a lot of stuff.
How did you get pulled into a lot of these things? Are you just like observing them from the outside, or have you been involved in communities where like people are coming to you? What brings you?
I live in a tiny town of 3,200 people next door to a refinery. They dump 256 tons of waste on the town I'm living in. You think I'm not going to respond? First of all, that's not a neighborly thing to do. I've got neighbors. I don't throw my trash into your yard. Wouldn't that piss you off?
Yeah.
No, they just dumped 256 tons of trash on us. So it pissed me off. And a couple weeks later, there's a land use permit hearing I see on the docket for them to continue to use the land that the refinery's on. It's a routine thing. The county makes money with the refinery operating, and they're going to give them a use permit. But I'm crazy enough. I went to the hearing myself. I pulled a little blue card and I handed in. I get my 3 minutes of infamy. And I only used about 45 seconds. And I said, Commissioner Clark, I use gas in my car. I don't want to stop them from getting their land use permit, but they just dumped 256 tons of toxic waste on my town. I want you to hold their permit in abeyance until they come back with a good neighbor agreement. The lawyer for the refinery pipes up out of turn. He wasn't called on. There's no such thing as a good neighbor agreement. And Commissioner Clark is sitting up there. He's looking at his watch. His eyes are rolling. He's thinking, you fucking kid, get out of my hearing. You're getting in the way of progress here. But the head of the lawyer said there's no such thing. And so he turns to me and says, what is a good neighbor agreement? I said, there isn't any formal definition of a good neighbor agreement, but it's a common sense thing. When two neighbors make an agreement how to behave better, it's a better neighbor. If you don't dump your garbage over the fence, I won't shoot your dog. The hearing came to a screeching halt. The governor of South Dakota found out that this is really not a very friendly thing to say. It triggered the refinery manager somehow, and he yelled, "This is crazy. You can't hold up our permit for a good neighbor agreement. You don't have the right." And Commissioner Clark's nostrils flared. His pupils got big. Down came the gavel. Kaboom. Hearings are held in abeyance until they come back with a good neighbor agreement.
Wow.
The lawyers were going crazy over there, bumping into each other, the head of the refinery. They didn't know what to do. And they come over to me and said, the town you're in is an unincorporated township. There isn't a legal entity there to negotiate with. I said, negotiate with me. So they said, okay, 2 weeks from now, I said, I'm going to come with two people from the other town of Rodeo on the other side, because you dumped on them too, just mostly on us, a little bit on them. But I'll bring two from there and two from the town I'm in, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. I actually went into their office with the other three people. We sat down and said, we're not here to negotiate. We're just going to schedule a time for us to come in and talk about the scope of the things that we're going to negotiate about. And they had fired the head of the refinery because of his outburst, getting their land use permit in a sling. And they had a real smooth operator to negotiate with us. And so I go home thinking things are going along about as well as could be handled. And I get a phone call. This is a small town. Word gets around. And people ask me, we're in a meeting down at the city hall. Can you come down? So I step in and they're all sitting around a table. They all look at me, some with a little bit of hostility in their grimace. One of them says, were you negotiating on behalf of the town with the refinery? Yes, I just came from a meeting with them. And they said, what gives you the right to negotiate on behalf of the town? I said, nothing does. Why don't you do the negotiation? I turned and left. So they formed a committee and decided there wasn't anybody there that knew how to play poker with a refinery manager. They brought me in as the negotiator. Other than the $300 million that was a negotiated settlement for the release itself, the Good Neighbor Agreement was about an $80 million additional settlement, which included the design and construction of the world's first fence line monitor system, a state-of-the-art fence line monitor. They agreed that we would have a 6-month design period to come up with what it was.
Wow.
During that 6 months, we designed a laser-based pollution detection system using ultraviolet and infrared lasers. If a chemical breaks the beam, you get a spectral fingerprint of the chemical. If you have a clean air beam that you've shot before, you can subtract that from the spectra you're looking at, and you know what chemical is in there that shouldn't be there. And if a chemistry spectra, now, this sounds amazingly like EEG, doesn't it? There's a waveform, and you decompose it into spectral peaks, and you have a library like a database. How would you ever imagine doing this? So anyway, the world's first infrared and ultraviolet laser pollution detection system was mandated for the refinery. They didn't want to build it, but they were forced to. The Good Neighbor Agreement had their land use permit. And when you have them by the land use permit, you got them. So they had no way around building it, and they built it. Now, the Air Quality Management District gets the ability to see the data, but their response was, what are you, crazy? What are you using physics to detect chemistry for? We have a gas analyzer. Okay, let's use gas analyzer. Imagine the fence line system with a gas analyzer. You build a shed on the fence line with a hole in the wall. You suck gas in the hole. If it hits that hole, you could detect it. I got a meter diameter beam that shoots a kilometer long. Anything that breaks the beam, I caught.
Mm.
Whose system is gonna catch stuff? You've got a little tiny hole. I've got a gigantic beam. They couldn't argue that theirs was better, and they were forced to build the system we wanted 30 years ago. About 8 years ago, the Air District brought together the EPA, universities in California, USC, UCLA, Berkeley, all the advice, the Cal Air Resources Board of the state. Everybody came to give advice about the best way to monitor emissions from a refinery. I was also invited. The system I came up with 30 years ago is declared the best system. It was mandated in the Bay Area, and then right after that, mandated for the whole state of California.
Wow.
But it's my avocation. So the design is in public domain. Nobody can patent it and live off the royalties of the design. It's my avocation. I do this for fun. Somehow playing poker when you've got a pair of twos really is a fun game. You have to be able to bluff, but you have to be able to bluff so realistically that they think you're not bluffing. So we operated the fence line system for about a year, and we had the data coming, the air quality coming in and the air quality coming out. I can subtract air quality from air quality, and I know how much has come out of them that they contributed. So I added up all of the shit that came out of them that went downstream and put it on a big stack of printout of a computer. And I asked the refinery manager if I could stop by for a meeting, and he said, "Stop by for lunch." They know me by now. I stopped in, I didn't accept the sandwich, but I set the printout on his desk and I said, "This printout shows everything that's come out of the refinery for the last year. Now, you haven't had a fire, you haven't had an accidental release. This is all just normal operation. But there's thousands of tons of toxicity coming out of the refinery. And I want you to change the valves that you're using from packing valves to a bellows valve. And in your house, you've got a washless faucet, I bet. Remember the old faucets? You have to take them apart, put the rubber thing on the bottom and put them back together? That's a packing valve. They're designed to eventually leak and have to be taken apart, fixed, and put back together. A bellows valve is a leakless valve. It's got a bellows with a pin that goes through a hole and it stops flow. And they work really well. When was the last time your faucet at home needed to have a faucet replaced because it was leaking? Well, man, those packing valves leak. The refinery has to have an employee with a sniffer walking around. It's their job to go from valve to valve and sniff them so they don't go above a certain number of parts per million. If they do, they have to flag it, flange it off, and take it apart and fix it and put it back together. So I'm telling him, I want you to switch every valve 2 inches and bigger in the refinery to a bellows valve. He said, quite honestly, we haven't done anything wrong. And do you have any idea what it would cost? I said, yeah, about $10 million. He said, yeah, that's about right. I said, I know the pipe layout in your refinery. I know what it's going to cost. And it's about 10 million bucks. He said, nobody could force us to do this because we haven't violated anything. And you're asking us to spend $10 million we don't have to spend. No, take your printout and get out. I said, okay, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my printout. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to San Francisco, Leaf, Cabraser, Hyman, and Bernstein. It's a class action lawsuit waiting to happen. And we're going to take this data and we're going to punch it into a dispersion model showing where it's going to go downwind. And that's going to create a class action of people that are exposed to your toxicity. And we're going to sue you for the long-term health consequence of your releases. So I'm going to tie you up in court for probably 5 years, depositions, interrogatories. Your engineers are going to be doing more of that than they are engineering. Do you want to run your refinery or do you want to spend time in court? You decide. He said, tell you what, leave the printout and I'll talk to lawyers and I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. I got a call the next day from a lawyer for the refinery and he's having it on just small talk, and lawyers don't really do small talk. I said, I bet you 10 to 1, you're calling to find out if I know somebody above the line in Leaf, Brazier, Hyman, and Bernstein. Above the line is a partner in the law firm. Below the line, you're a lawyer on their staff, but you're above the line, you're somebody. And he said, yeah, I said, the way to find out is to say no. Fuck around and find out. That was the end of the conversation. I got a call to go back into the office to talk to the manager about a week after that. I sat down with him and I said, talk to the lawyers. I talked to the lawyer. He smiled. I heard it. He said, we looked at it and this 10 million is a lot of money. Valves fail. And when they fail, we have to fix them. Instead of fixing the valve, what about we replace them on a maintenance basis? Now we replace them over time. And it would take a few years, but we'd replace them when they fail. And I'm sitting here with a pair of twos going, I know he's got his royal flush over there. He could tell me to get out of his office in a flash. But I said, that's reasonable. I said, okay, I'd agree to that. There's no way in hell we can force them to do that. Now, they agreed to do it. That's a really big thing, way beyond what just happened there, because it established a new best available control technology for refineries in California. No refinery could be forced to use a bellows valve until it was now best available control technology. And now when they have a valve that fails, they have to replace it with a bellows valve. We calculated with another year after the 2 years, because they've been operating this fence line for over 30 years now. We calculated after they fixed everything, a year's worth of good operation emissions, 700 tons a year less emission.
Wow.
700 tons. And you think, 700 tons a year, that's 365 days a year, a ton up in the air, it disperses all over. It's a very small impact on any individual. Yeah, you live downwind of the refinery then.
Right.
So you stick your nose in their tailpipe and see what it's like. Anyway, I played poker with the refinery and had a good time doing that.